And when they finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And he said to him, "You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." And he said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said it to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." I want to invite you into this scripture from what you've heard and what you've shared and into its context a little bit. This is an interaction that I like to think of as one of the earliest come to Jesus meetings. Thank you. I got a boo at the first service on that. Which I will gladly accept. I accept any response because it means people are awake. Peter often gets come to Jesus meetings. I think he's the original, it's all the time with Peter. Just come to Jesus meetings all the time with him. And this is like the final culminating moment in the Gospel of John. And just note to you, if you, ever have to have hard meetings, say you need to host a real hard HR meeting, you follow Jesus' example, and you do it on a beach with a little breakfast. Like a real good setting sets the tone, huh? They have been fishing, they're on the beach, it's pleasant, the sun is rising. That's how I, picture it. The camera is panning back, everybody's full. It's like good old times. They are having a great time. There's a bonfire. And they've been through a lot. There's been a crucifixion. There's been a resurrection. They are sort of aimless. And Jesus finally gets down to business. And he pulls Peter aside, leans in. Camera leans in too. And Jesus says, "Do you love me?" And Peter's like, "Yeah, I do. Obviously, I love you. I love you very much. I'm so in love with you." Now, Jesus could have been more conflict avoidant, which is probably how I would have gone, and said something like, "Peter, I know that was a really stressful time. That whole crucifixion thing was very hard. We've been through a lot. I hope we can keep working on our goals." He could have created a SMART goal, and thank you. He could have created we're gonna do a strategic plan, disciples. We're just gonna get this organized in a new way. Sorry, that was my fault. But Jesus is not he has nerves of steel. And maybe he's not from the Midwest. And so he is not conflict avoidant. And he dives right in and he's like, "Peter, do you love me?" Except he is not like Peter, "Do you love me?" He is like, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Which is sort of like when your mom uses your middle name. Because Jesus hasn't called Simon for a long time. We meet Simon at the beginning of every gospel, but by the end, he's Peter. He's had this faith and spiritual transformation, and he's changed so much that his name is changed. We see this in our scriptures and in our tradition. We see it in the Hebrew Bible that Jesus and Simon Peter would have learned from, right? We see it as Sarai and Abram become Sarah and Abraham. We see it as Jacob wrestles with God to become Israel, right? That whole existence is born out of wrestling with God in grace and fear and trembling and need of forgiveness and mistakes, and Israel is born. We see it in the story of Mary Magdalene. Magdalene is probably not a last name. Magdalene is this religious name. Magdalene means tower, the one you look to, the one you see, the one that's steady in a storm. We see it when Saul becomes Paul. The scales fall from his eyes. And so when Jesus says, Simon, son of John, do you love me? It is rough and brutal. It cuts deep on Peter. It's going back to the very beginning of their relationship. It goes back all the way. Everything they have done together, every place they have been together, everything they have been through together, Jesus throws him right back to the beginning and says, do you love me? Because love requires more than words. And he asks 3 times, which most biblical scholars will talk about how it echoes this sense of Peter's denial of Jesus 3 times. And maybe Jesus just liked doing things in 3. Totally possible. I don't know. We all like things in triplicate, perhaps. But there was this moment before the crucifixion where Peter learns that someone will deny Jesus and someone will betray Jesus. And Peter, who has like all of the energy and hopefulness of like Buddy the Elf, is like, oh no, surely not me. We will not. I will not. I love you. Except Peter has none of the like willingness to see this to fruition. And so Peter denies Jesus 3 times. Peter can't stay at the crucifixion. He can't be there to witness the ugliest, most violent, most harmful moments of Jesus' life. In fact, even at the resurrection, he can't stay there. Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb on Easter morning just to be there, to show up, to be present. And she arrives and the tomb is empty, and she, in her searching and in her wondering, goes back to the disciples. She finds them. And then there's this foot race in the Gospel of John, which I will admit is always a little hard on Peter. The Gospel of John has to point out that Peter comes in second to the beloved disciple. And there they land like heavy breathing at the tomb entrance, and they're just like, yeah, Mary, he's gone. Shrug. Out. They don't even stay there to figure out what's happened. They don't stay there to help Mary. They don't stay there to do anything. Mary stays, and then she witnesses to the resurrection face. She goes back to the disciples, and they're not even sure that this woman knows anything. And then they have an encounter with Jesus, and they're like, oh, okay, resurrection, it's a thing. We sense something hopeful beyond these crucifixions. And then they have a second one, which is largely because of Thomas. You may have heard the story, Doubting Thomas, but really it's missed the meeting Thomas. Thomas wasn't there at the first meeting, so there's a second meeting. He's not asking for anything more. I feel like his brand is unfair. I'm just saying, show up, don't miss the meeting, that's all. And after all of that, Peter says, I'm going fishing. I'm going fishing. And when Peter says, I'm going fishing at the end of the Gospel of John, it's not like, I need to take a break and meditate a little. And you know where I love to center and be calm and still and get all of my feelings out and into the world and just be with nature? Fishing. It is not that. Fishing is a vocation for Peter. Fishing is how he made his living. Fishing is probably how his family made their income, how they fed their family, how they survived in the world before they met Jesus. He met Jesus when he was fishing as Simon, son of John. And so when he says, I'm going fishing, he means I'm going back. I'm done with this. I don't know what to do anymore. It's unclear. It's uncertain. I can't live in this uncertainty. I can't live with this risk. My heart is broken. I don't know where we're going. I don't know who I am in this without Jesus. And so they go fishing. And this is when Jesus shows up again. And Simon jumps in the water and goes to him, and they have this overflowing catch, and they go to the beach, and then the beach is a barbecue and a cookout, and then it gets hard, right? Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Jesus echoes right back to that metaphor that he's been picking up over and over and over from his tradition. Be a good shepherd. You know what it means to be a good shepherd. Feed the sheep, take care of the vulnerable, put them first. Make sure everybody has what they need. Make sure there is calm, cool, clean water. Make sure there is safe pasture. Find the lost, heal the broken. He asks him over and over, will you feed my sheep? Will you tend my sheep? Will you take care of them when the predators come? There's this beautiful piece of midrash, and I've mentioned before that midrash is like the rabbis telling stories alongside their sacred texts. It's this beautiful tradition that gives kind of more life and energy and flesh to these ancient stories. And most of these pieces of midrash are ancient themselves. And so the rabbis tell this story of David as a shepherd, King David as a little shepherd boy. And that first he would let the smallest sheep graze, and then the larger sheep, and then finally the very largest of the flock would get to graze. So that the most vulnerable, so that the smallest sheep would get their fill first. And the rabbis say, this is the moment when God says, this is the man to shepherd my people. Being caring, being attentive, watching that the vulnerable receive what they need first. That's what being a good shepherd is all about. And it's this risky choice to make with your life. So when Jesus says to Peter, feed my sheep, he's not looking for words, he's looking for action. It is not about words. It is not about any words at all. It is not about thoughts. It is not about prayers. It is about putting this into work. This Monday, I was at the Capitol, our Capitol, not the national Capitol. Nobody invited me there. Actually, nobody invited me here either. And in talking about these 3 particular bills this week, about putting the 10 Commandments in every classroom, about putting a sign that says, "In God we trust," above every classroom door, and a 3rd bill about allowing pastors to take the place of guidance counselors. In these interactions with our senators, there seems to be this very genuine sense that they, as people of faith, as Christians, believe that these things will help. They named over and over the violence of gun violence and shootings in our schools. They named the harm that happens to children. They named the rates of depression and suicide and all these mental health struggles, and they genuinely think that a poster of the 10 Commandments, thank you, Christian, is going to help or matter at all. Or that just having another pastor around to talk with and to be supportive will help. But funding our public schools in fullness, funding enough so that you can have the right number of guidance counselors to student ratio, funding so that there are resources and markers and crayons, and we don't have to have potlucks to fund things for teachers anymore, didn't cross their mind. And the truth is, I want the same things in some ways that they wanted. But I don't think we need the 10 Commandments on the wall, and I don't think we need In God We Trust, and I don't think, actually, I 100% know that I have a master's in education and a master's in divinity, and this does not qualify me to be in a school as a guidance counselor or a chaplain or anything. I did mention to Senator Merman that if he really wanted a pastor in the schools, I would find wherever his grandchildren are and be the first to volunteer. Because I think we feel the same way. I know, that sounds real mean right here, doesn't it? It didn't. He agrees to disagree with me every time we talk, so. I feel like we are in this space where people are naming this Christian faith in such a strange and unchristian way. If Jesus said, "Do you love me?" we would say, "Yeah, we're putting the 10 Commandments in the school." And he would say, "Do you love me?" We have people with multiple bedrooms in multiple homes and multiples, but we have folks who don't have a place to sleep at night. And we don't want them to pay any more taxes. We want to restructure things to help the people with the most instead of the people with the least. We want to do the opposite of what King David did in terms of letting the smallest folks eat first and have first and get their fill first. If Jesus said to us, "Do you love me?" we would say, "Yeah, we have insurance companies, and they are really great at taking care of people and making a profit on our health care before the doctors or the nurses. We are really great at paying for health care by GoFundMe, and we love medical debt and church spaghetti feeds. Do you love me?" We have bills in the unicameral right now to put younger and younger people in our prisons. We have prisons that are for profit. We refuse to invest in our public schools. We choose tax breaks despite a mountain of evidence that none of this will trickle down to the last and to the least. We choose harm and domination and white Christian nationalism. We choose weapons and greed and power and our own comfort and loud misogyny over and over and over. We have this loud sense of a Christian voice that is really just a bully, filled with cruelty and sitting in our highest office. And Jesus asks us, just like he asked Peter, "Do you love me? Will you do the hard work with every breath and every moment and every heartbeat?" And maybe we can't do everything all the time, but we have to keep showing up. We have to keep trying. We have to keep looking for glimmers of hope. We have to keep finding grace for one another and accountability where we might need to grow, because love is action. And love requires us to be present, even if it's hard. May we have the courage to say yes when we are asked. May it be so. Amen.